The TMJ-TMD conundrum is real and has been puzzling the dental and medical professions for decades. This is the TMJ-TMD Demystified podcast with Dr. Tony Urbanic, where we'll connect the dots between TMD symptoms and the actual cause. We'll tackle common TMD misconceptions and educate you, the practitioner, about a simple, tested, and proven TMD solution that has already provided relief to thousands of patients, while helping practitioners build an additional source of income free from insurance control. Welcome to this episode of the TMJ-TMD Demystified podcast.
Welcome, TMD Warriors. We are here for the next episode of TMD Demystified, and my name is Tony Urbanic. In today's episode, I am going to attempt to begin to answer, because I believe this will turn into more than one episode. We'll begin to answer the most common question from patients using the Urbanic device and protocol. We have now treated over 4,000 people in a single practice over the past 8 years now, over 4,000 successfully treated patients using this device and protocol. Let me grab it. And this is the device. It's a tool. Patients want to call it magical. Patients wanted to call it the Save My Life device. They did. I had to drop back and call it something, so I dropped back and called it the Urbanic device and protocol. The device itself is patented. The protocol is not, but they go together. You can't just slap this in a patient's mouth and expect it to go well. You have to use the protocol. You have to know why the device is successful, why it works, what happens when you do use it. And when you understand those things, it'll be very, 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 very successful for the patient and for you and your practice. But after 4,000 people, we have now been able to acknowledge and generate the most common question that the patients ask, either while using or after the point where they get to a successful plateau of symptom relief. And the most common the most common question that patients ask is, how come no one ever told me about this before? And that's really what we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about that for the next several episodes, because the answer to this question is very complex. I don't think it's complicated, but it's complex, meaning many parts. Actually, it's pretty simple. When you take a look at our healthcare system from all aspects, from every point of view, because everyone has a different point of view on our healthcare system. And I think most of them are valid points of view. If you have a point of view, it's where you're looking from. And the points of view vary all over the board, and actually have a part to play in answering this question, how come nobody ever told me about this? The points of view I'm going to list, and then hopefully over the next several episodes, I will try to answer this question, how come nobody ever told me about this, from their points of view. Some of them are well-known, some of them are not. A couple of them will surprise you, I think, but it's an important question to answer because the patients ask it. It's an important question because the patients ask it, and they ask it sincerely. They're not just throwing out, a question to give you that attaboy on being successfully treated. They really want to know because, and what I can tell you is the majority of people who ask this question have had this these symptoms for a long time. And when I say a long time, for decades. You can imagine what a patient must feel like when they have gone through 10 years, 20 years. We have many patients who have had 40 years of symptoms, and a few more than 40 years, a few 50 years, but I can enumerate tens, actually probably more than 400 patients, 500 patients who have had these symptoms for 30 or 40 years, and how they must feel after seeing multiple doctors, being placed on multiple medications, some of them having surgical care for the symptoms, not necessarily surgical care of the TMJ, but some of them also have had surgery on the TMJ, but different types of surgical care for their symptoms, certainly pharmaceutical care and all kinds of treatments for decades with no relief. No one can tell them really what's going on. No one can explain the phenomenon of all these symptoms. And yet they come in and do a simple device and protocol for a few weeks to a few months, actually a few months. And they want to know, how come nobody ever told me about this? And some of them actually more have a little antagonism or anxiety or anger about the question, because they realize that the system has abused them. That's a fact. And anyone who wants to argue with me about that or comment on that or have me discuss it with them in a civil way, I will be happy to do that. But our observation and my personal, my practice observation with the others in the practice, my associate, myself, and other doctors in our network of doctors have realized that once the patient is successfully treated, they want to know how come no one ever told them about it. And they begin to realize that our system is greatly flawed. Not trying to point fingers or overly criticize or denigrate any individual person. Let me make that clear. Not on a warpath to denigrate any individual person. But I am on some kind of path, I'm sure I want to call it a warpath, but on a path to criticize and bring to light our system, our healthcare system. And in this case, I'm really only speaking of the limited area that I have knowledge on, great knowledge on, which is temporomandibular joint disorder, and how TMD has been abused, and the patients with TMD have been abused by our system. So this is a big question. Now, there are many components to answering this question, and I'm going to kind of list these out. First would be teaching institutions. They have a large part to play in why no one ever told patients about this. Next is hospital and corporate health groups, like large medical groups, hospitals, which are nothing more than large medical groups. High on the list is venture capitalists. That is the American way. Capitalism and venture capitalists supply the capital that make our healthcare system work. And some of it is good and some of it is bad. Next is government generally. That can include state government, but particularly national government, federal government. Next on the list is physicians and dentists themselves. They have a large part to play in how and why no one ever told patients about this successful action, which is obvious. Patients have a part to play in why they never heard about this successful treatment, patients themselves. And then I think the ninth and maybe the most important are pharmaceutical companies, big pharma, because they have a significant role and reason to encourage and protect their business, pharmaceuticals. So that's the group that, when fully exposed and dissected and discussed and points brought out, will explain to both the patient and anyone interested why we constantly hear this comment, this question from patients: why has no one ever told me about this before? So let's start with the insurance companies. And if I'll try to make this as less disjointed as I can. For those listening, most of you, I would assume most of you are professional dentists, and you're very familiar with healthcare insurance, which is broken down into medical insurance and dental insurance. But insurance companies are interested primarily in their own survival. Whether they claim themselves as nonprofit or for-profit, they have to make excess dollars, money, over and beyond what they charge in premiums, so that they can pay for the executive and employee payroll and bonuses and cost of expense, and their expense of their offices and marketing, et cetera, et cetera. And so they have a vested interest in the cost of the premiums that they expect, and also keeping in line the money that comes in so they can survive. The state charters on let me go back a minute. The insurance, health insurance, actually is not insuring anything. To compare health insurance to general insurance is an easy thing to do. General insurance is, well, let me give you the definition. I looked it up. An insurance company is a company that creates insurance products to take on risks in return for the payment of premiums. So insurance takes on risk. Now, what we call general insurance will cover things like automobile insurance or home insurance, which takes on the risk of you have a catastrophic loss. And if you have an auto accident, that catastrophic loss, either to replace the automobile or repair the automobile, will be covered for you under the terms of the insurance. Usually a major part of that is covered by the insurance company, and then you have your own portion to pay. Same with home insurance. If you have a loss, according to the terms of the insurance, they take the risk. And if you have a fire or a windstorm loss, they will either repair or totally replace your home. When it comes to health insurance, it's totally different. Let me take you through this very briefly, because the catastrophe in a health problem would be a catastrophic loss on something like, well, an auto accident, and you end up with multiple broken bones, or a head injury, or cancer, at which point those would be considered catastrophic losses, which are named losses. And many years ago, insurance companies actually offered catastrophic health insurance. And it was very effective and relatively cheap, so that you could insure your family and yourself and insure your body on catastrophic loss. And if any of these catastrophes happen to you, then you would be assured that you would get good health care, no matter what the costs were. If you were in the hospital for a week, or if you were in the hospital for a year, or the rehabilitation costs went on for 5 years and were millions of dollars, you were covered. But the insurance companies learned that they could not make any significant profit. And again, whether they're nonprofit or profit, I already explained to you that they have to make excess money so that they can pay their salaries, their bonuses, their executives, and their marketing costs. But the catastrophic insurance is no longer available because they could not make enough money on catastrophic insurance. It's not available anymore. And we all know what's happening to our healthcare insurance, and the rates are going sky high, and the coverage is going significantly lower with copays through the roof. And so in healthcare insurance companies are really not insurance. They're not insuring, so they're healthcare plans, and they distribute your premiums as they see fit according to whatever they think is appropriate. And that's why healthcare should not be considered insurance. It is a healthcare plan. I think possibly some plans are better than others. Some plans distribute the premiums in a better way. I won't go into the characterization of healthcare plans, whether they be private or public. I think there's certainly a lot to say about that, and I am not an expert. Don't want to be an expert on that. But the point is, to call healthcare insurance, in quotes, is inappropriate because it's not insurance. The catastrophic healthcare insurance was eliminated years ago. That was insurance. Now it's not insurance. It's healthcare plans. And then you can decide whether you want to join a healthcare plan or not. If I had my druthers, I would just get catastrophic insurance. And if I was sick, when I got sick, when I needed my tonsils out, or I needed a set of glasses, I would just go in and pay for those, and I would have control over how much healthcare dollars I spent, and the catastrophes were insured. Now, dental insurance is even worse. Dental is definitely not insurance. Those listening, you all know the dental insurance is dental plans at which an insurance company collects premiums from either an employer, or the patient themselves, employee, and distributes a certain percentage to the dentists who provide services and keep a certain percentage for themselves. And the percentage that they keep for themselves, as far as they can, increases as much as it can, and the percentage that is distributed to the providers, the dentists, hygienists, dental practices, as we all experience and have experienced over the past 25 to 30 years, is significantly decreased on a year-to-year basis. So they're not insuring dental, and the dental is limited in the maximum amount that is paid per patient each year. So it is a plan that basically secures the longevity of the insurance company being able to pay their executive bonuses, their payroll, their brick and mortar, their marketing expense, at the expense of the providers. At the expense of the providers. We all know that. So I'm just going over these things. We'll get to how this affects temporomandibular joint in a minute. But that is what the current concepts of insurance is within the United States of America. So just to clarify that for everyone listening, So with that being a preamble, so how does this affect the patient's question? Why has no one ever told me about this? Well, the basic is the insurance companies don't want patients to know about something that is extremely effective, relatively inexpensive, because insurance companies are limited by their charter with state insurance directors, state insurance departments. They are limited on how much, quote, profit, nonprofit or actual profit, they can keep and how much they have to distribute to the people who pay the premiums. And that varies from contract to contract, state to state. But every charter for a healthcare insurance company mandates that they have to distribute a certain number of those premiums to patients, to the system. The system itself is flawed when it comes to TMJ, and this has been my experience now since the early 70s, mid 70s, that has been way back then a growing number of what I have to call TMD gurus who use temporomandibular joint symptoms, whether they know anything about the problem or can define it, but they have developed a list of patients one way or another with these symptoms, and then intentionally try to game medical insurance companies to pay for the services in many different ways, using multiple kinds of machines, diagnostic criteria, different treatments, extremely complicated diagnostic processes. The longer, the better. And I've spoken on this before. I mean, I've actually observed, diagnostic reports sent to insurance companies that run 30 and 40 pages in the obvious attempt to make it look, that their services are extremely valid, and documenting why all these services are valid and always attached to a large dollar claim amount. That's a definition of TMD guru. And if you are a TMD guru, I feel sorry for you. And if you want to criticize or throw out some mud toward my direction, go right ahead. But I would discuss it with you if anyone wants to discuss it in a civil way. I don't have a high opinion of TMD gurus at all. It really boils down, and this is not the phrase that I came up with. It was one of my colleagues who I respect very highly, and he's very well placed in the dental industry, highly regarded and highly placed in the dental industry, and known by millions in the dental industry. And he just called it smoke and mirrors. So I won't take credit for that, but I may use it because it's appropriate. The dental gurus use a lot of smoke and mirrors, and the insurance companies are not dumb people. I mean, again, they're in there for their own survival. They have a business. I don't denigrate the business. The American way is capitalism and for profit. So they full well know and acknowledge that there are a number, and a growing number, of dentists, all dentists, got to have some dental knowledge of some kind to treat TMD because it fell in our lap. Medical industry didn't want anything to do with the temporomandibular joint because it's attached to the jaw, which is attached to the teeth. So this growing number of gurus game the system. The medical insurance companies are well aware of it. They think it's just a big black hole, and they dismiss and suppress and denigrate anything and everything to do with the word temporomandibular joint disorder. Personally, I'm well experienced with this problem as an oral maxillofacial surgeon for the past 46 years, and for the first 32 years, did 2,000 temporomandibular joint surgeries in dealing with insurance companies regarding reimbursement for temporomandibular joint surgery. I've taken full responsibility for, my following that focus on surgery for the first 32 years. But I wasn't alone, and there still are several, not as anywhere near as many oral maxillofacial surgeons who want to treat TMD surgically, but there still are many, probably only 10% of the original numbers, and they are focused really on total joint reconstruction. And why total joint reconstruction is because the total joint reconstructive arena is highly financed and highly promoted by the medical, surgical, implantable device companies. It's a big business. And so basically it's come down to total joint or nothing. There are arthroscopic procedures and surgery, arthroscopic surgery that is used and promoted, but actually finding more and more disfavor than favor. And again, the equipment and the process of using arthroscopes on the temporomandibular joint is extremely expensive and promoted by companies who have a huge marketing advertising budget to promote the hardware. But again, oral maxillofacial surgeons have found out that overall, over the long haul, arthroscopic surgery is ineffective over the long haul. Maybe short term, you'll have some benefits. Long term, no. And that is what I found out personally, and why 12, probably now 13 years ago, I announced and quit doing temporomandibular joint surgery. And, investigated and found out about an intraoral device that actually works. So getting back to the point, so the insurance companies have a vested interest in suppressing and decreasing the awareness of a device that works really well and is documented to work really well. So the last thing I'll do, I'll share you my story, which is critical in nature and has to do, and I will name the company, not any person, but as I found the exquisite and excessive success of using a device that does nothing more and nothing less than separate the posterior teeth like a set of crutches would unload a inflamed knee, and a device that does nothing more than unload an inflamed temporomandibular joint, because that's all this device does. Unloads the TMJ like a set of crutches would unload an inflamed knee. That's all it does. And you got to use a protocol. But as I began my work in this area and I found out how successful it was, I automatically, because temporomandibular joint surgery was, if it was going to be covered at all, it was never covered by dental insurance, but it was going to be covered. TMJ surgery was going to be covered as under medical insurance. I began putting in claims, a single claim, not a guru style claim with multiple segmented claims, but a single claim for the device to medical insurance carriers, primarily in Tennessee, Blue Cross Blue Shield, because Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I just looked it up, covers 44% of the lives, insured lives in Tennessee. And so I used, as is the usual custom, to use the CPT code closest to this device, because this device has no CPT code. Its only effect is on the temporomandibular joint. There's no effect in the mouth, no effect on the teeth. The only effect is relief of inflammation within the temporomandibular joint. So it's safe to say that it's a medical device qualified under medical insurance, and claims were made, multiple claims were made, because we were so busy using this in the early days of its use. And Blue Cross Blue Shield began sending letters and phone calls and saying, "What do? You're sending in, multiple claims a week for on a CPT code, which was the surgical splint code." For those of you who are not oral and maxillofacial surgeons, if I held this up to you, if I held up a surgical splint to you, you would say, "Well, that looks pretty much like the Urbanic device." It's just, but we used a surgical splint, which is basically giving you the starting point. When you do orthognathic surgery, you have to have a surgical splint so you know where to start reconstructing the facial skeleton from. You have to have a stable place, either stable maxilla or stable mandible, and then you have a splint upon which you construct the remaining facial skeleton. Well, multiple letters, multiple complaints from Blue Cross Blue Shield is you can't do that. This is not, you didn't do orthognathic surgery. This is not a surgical splint. I said, well, give me a CPT code then. Give me a CPT code that qualifies, and we'll use that. Anyway, so my contract specified that in a disagreement, I had the opportunity, I could call a meeting with the executives, and this went around for 2 years. 2 years, they paid the claims but complained I couldn't. So finally, I called the meeting, and they had to agree to it. And the chief medical officer from Blue Cross Blue Shield and their chief attorney and several executives from Blue Cross Blue Shield actually traveled from Chattanooga to Nashville in my conference room to have this meeting where I could explain to them how successful this was and how many dollars they could spend, they would save on MRIs and CT scans and temporomandibular joint surgery and all kind of dental gurus who were gaming the system, actually scamming the system. And along with me in that conference room, I had my attorney, and I sat for 45 minutes, and I gave him the statistics, and I gave him the proof, and I discussed again how many millions of dollars they could save if they just gave a CPT code that fit the service. Okay, it's not an orthognathic surgical device. It's a device that separates the back teeth. After 45 minutes, the chief medical officer said, "Dr. Urbanic, I can't argue with your findings. I can't argue with statistics. I can't argue with success." And when he was finished, the attorney in the room informed I and my attorney that no matter what else was thought about it, there would be no CPT code. There would not be a request to have a CPT code issued, and there would never be a CPT code for the device. So if you call that canceling or suppression, I think it would be appropriate. So actually, they did us a favor, because that is the reason that the device itself is not covered, not going to be covered, not able to be covered under medical insurance. And the device itself is not a dental device. It does nothing to the teeth. It's not a night guard. It's not a retainer. It doesn't retain the teeth, and although it does retain the teeth, but that isn't that's not the effectiveness of it. And it's not an orthodontic retainer. So that is actually the reason that it is a non-covered, no CPT code medical device. And that's the story behind it. I don't believe I have shared that with you on these episodes at all. I thought it was kind of an interesting story. And they actually did my practice, myself, a favor, didn't do the patients a favor at all. And that's the point of my discussion here. They did not do the patients a favor at all. Medical health insurance companies are there for their survival and to make a profit, whether they are nonprofits or whether they are for-profit insurance companies. They are there to make a profit, and they have a bad taste in their mouth. Admittedly, I agree, because of the dental gurus and the promotion of the dental gurus. They openly promote how to game the insurance companies. And that must infuriate an executive from an insurance company to read some of this stuff, because I've read it. It probably infuriates them to get a 30 or 40 page diagnostic review and the 5, 10, 12 different diagnostic processes that they put the patient through, plus the 3, 4, 5 different kinds of treatment that they put the patients through, and then get a bill for, 5 or 10 or 15, or I have seen as much as $30,000, actually as much as $50,000. So I, from their point of view, I can look at their point of view. That must infuriate them. And so I can understand why I was told, and this was many years ago, I can place it how many years ago? It was probably about 7 or 8 years ago. There will be no CPT code, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, who's the big dog in Tennessee, covering 44% of covered lives in Tennessee, is like, no way. So to answer the patient's question, as it regards to insurance companies, just to insurance companies, it answers the question. The most common question from patients using the Urbanic device and protocol is, how come no one ever told me about this before? And regarding the point of view of insurance companies, that's one reason why they have never heard about it before. I apologize if necessary, if you think I need to apologize for this episode. I brought in some personal stuff. I questioned myself whether I should or not, but I decided I would. Try to be transparent, try to be real. These episodes, if nothing else, I try to be real to the listener to help you understand everything you need to understand about this problem. And insurance, in this case, insurance is a very, very important part of this, because you will hear those two questions from patients. And by the way, the second most common question is, how come it's not covered by insurance? The most common question is, how come they ever told me about this when they have like no more pain after 30 years? And the second most common question is always when we do the consultation and the patient says, is this covered by insurance? And then they go, how come it's not covered by insurance? Why is not this covered by medical insurance? I have a good medical insurance policy. Well, now you know the answer. And that has intimately to do with TMD and treatment of TMD. If you're already a provider, now you have you have another piece to the story here. You can review this. And again, I hope I made it salient. I hope I made it clear. I hope I gave you a structure upon which the answer was built. And later on, maybe not in sequence, I have to decide, but we will cover these other points of view of why successful treatment of TMD in a very simple way, and why patients ask, how come never tell me about this? And they will cover, hospitals and corporate health, venture capitalists, the government, primarily the federal government itself, physicians and dentists who know little to nothing about TMD, patients themselves, and then big pharma. With that said, I'd like to wrap it up and invite you to, again, comment, criticize if you'd like. I can be reached at tony@tmjservices.net. My director of marketing and education, Dr. Naomi Williams, can be reached at naomi@tmjservices.net. If you'd like to join the growing number of doctors who use the Urbanic device and protocol for the treatment of TMD, you can go directly to our website at www.urbanictmj.com and look over a tremendous amount of material on our device, how you can join, all kind of success stories and things like that. It outlines it really well. Until next time, I am Tony Urbanic, and this is TMD Demystified.